A woman risked everything to find her husband's killer, and for that, she hired the deadliest warrior. On this path of revenge, survival was the only option. We're just a few steps away from reaching 1,500 subscribers, and we'd be honored to have you with us. Thank you to every kind soul who's joined us so far. With your support, we share peaceful, heartfelt stories that warm the soul. If you enjoy calm, meaningful stories, don't forget to subscribe. You're part of this family now. Now, make yourself comfortable. It's time for the story. The air was thick with heat and dust, and the sun was sinking low, painting the horizon in streaks of orange and crimson. Anna Keller kept her bonnet low over her brow, one hand firm on the reins as the wagon rattled down the rutted dirt road. Beside her sat her husband, Daniel, a man whose strength had been forged in war and tempered by loss. He had seen hell, walked through it, and somehow returned with the will to build a life out of what was left. That was why she loved him, because in a world that took everything, he still dreamed. The wagon creaked and groaned as they rolled toward a small trading post. Half a dozen buildings crouched against the emptiness, their wood weathered and bleached by years of wind. Anna could feel Daniel's unease even before he spoke. "Be quick," he murmured, his eyes sweeping over the shadows between the buildings. "This place, it doesn't sit right with me." Anna nodded and stepped down from the wagon, her skirts brushing the dust. Inside the general store, the air was close and smelled faintly of tobacco and flour. She gathered supplies: beans, coffee, salt, letting the rhythm of the simple task calm her. But through the window, she saw them. 5 riders. Dust swirled in their wake, their coats hanging loose over low-slung gun belts. At their center was Victor Kane, a name spoken in low voices across the frontier. His reputation was built on violence, his smile always a prelude to blood. He dismounted with the lazy confidence of a man who had never known fear, the black brim of his hat casting his face into shadow. Anna's heart quickened. She turned toward the door just as Daniel stepped outside, a sack of provisions slung over his shoulder. Kane's eyes found him instantly, and something in the air tightened, like a noose being drawn. Well. Kane's voice was smooth, almost amused. "Daniel Keller, I thought you were buried years ago." Daniel's jaw tensed. "And I thought you were rotting in a cell." Kane chuckled, taking a slow step forward. His men fanned out, their boots grinding in the dirt. "Bars don't hold a man with friends," he said. "And you've got something that belongs to me." "You're mistaken," Daniel replied evenly. "Any debt you think I owe you was settled long ago. That's where you're wrong." Kane's smile didn't reach his eyes. Anna saw his hand twitch toward his gun. Daniel reached, but he was a heartbeat too slow. The gunshot cracked through the still air, sharp as a whip. Daniel staggered back, a bloom of dark red spreading across his shirt. He collapsed to his knees, the sack of provisions spilling at his side. Anna's breath caught in her throat as she rushed forward, pressing her hands to the wound. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice breaking. His eyes met hers, full of something like apology before they lost their light. Kane watched with a faint smirk before turning away. "I'd keep that mouth shut if I were you, widow," he said over his shoulder, and then he was gone, his men trailing after him like shadows. The days that followed blurred into one long ache. Anna buried Daniel on a quiet patch of ground, the wind whispering through dry grass. The so-called sheriff muttered useless condolences, his eyes sliding away when she demanded justice. "Kane runs this land, Miss Keller. Best you let it be." But Anna could not let it be. Each night, the image of Daniel bleeding on the porch burned in her mind. The helplessness festered like rot. One evening, alone by the fire, she spread out a battered map, tracing lines toward the places few dared to travel. There was only one name she circled: Elias Gray. Some called him a Comanche warrior. Others whispered he'd turned on his own kind. What mattered was that he was a killer for hire, deadly, efficient, and bound to no one. Anna had nothing left to lose. Her journey westward stripped away whatever softness remained in her. Days bled into nights. Her hands blistered on the reins. The bruises on her thighs deepened from the saddle. She rode until she found him, in a dim, smoke-filled saloon where the air stank of whiskey and stale sweat. He sat alone at a corner table, a man carved from silence and shadow, his face marked by an old scar running from temple to jaw. "I want to hire you," Anna said, her voice steady. Elias studied her for a long moment before replying. "You want someone dead?" Yes. $100, he said finally. And your best horse. Anna's heartbeat quickened. It was nearly all she had left. She extended her hand. He took it without hesitation. The deal was struck. And Victor Kane's days were numbered. The wind stung Anna's face as she rode alongside Elias Gray, the scent of dust and dry sage drifting through the air. The land stretched endlessly before them, barren, unyielding, and silent, save for the rhythmic thud of hooves against hard earth. Kane was somewhere out there, breathing free while Daniel lay beneath cold soil. Elias didn't speak much. His dark eyes swept the horizon, missing nothing. He rode like a man who'd learned long ago that the world would kill you the moment you stopped paying attention. His hand never strayed far from the knife on his belt, and there was a quiet readiness in his posture, a constant, coiled awareness. Anna wanted to ask him why he agreed to help, if money was really the only reason, but the words stayed trapped in her throat. She'd chosen him because he was the kind of man who could do what needed to be done without flinching. Maybe his reasons didn't matter. That night, they camped beneath a ridge of jagged stone, the firelight flickering over Elias's face as he ran a whetstone along his blade in slow, deliberate strokes. Anna sat across from him, staring into the fire until the flames blurred. "You've killed a lot of men," she said quietly. "Yes. Do you ever think about them?" His eyes lifted, sharp and unblinking. Thinking about them doesn't change what happened. Anna let the silence grow between them. She wanted to say she wasn't sure if she could pull the trigger when the moment came. But she knew what his answer would be, something blunt, without comfort. And he'd be right. By dawn, they were moving again, following the faint traces Kane's gang left behind. Elias showed her how to read the land, the bent grass where a man had knelt, the scuff marks of boots against stone, the uneven depth of hoofprints that told him how fast the horses had been moving. His skill unsettled her. It was as if the land spoke to him in a language no one else could hear. By midday, they spotted smoke rising from a small creek ahead. Two of Kane's men sat by the water, their horses loosely tied nearby. They laughed as they passed a flask between them, unaware they were being watched. Elias crouched low beside her, his rifle in hand. "We take them quick. One shot each. No noise." Anna's pulse pounded in her ears. She gripped her revolver, the metal slick in her damp palm. Elias fired first. His shot dropped one man instantly, the cup in his hand tumbling into the creek. The second outlaw scrambled for his gun. Anna raised her revolver, aiming for his chest. Her finger trembled on the trigger. For a moment, she saw Daniel's face in her mind, smiling at her from the wagon bench. The hesitation was enough. The man's gun was halfway out of its holster when Elias lunged forward, his knife flashing in the sun. The blade sank into the outlaw's throat, silencing him before he could fire. Elias wiped his knife on the man's coat and turned to her. "Next time, you don't wait." Anna's hands shook as she lowered her gun. She couldn't tell if it was from fear or shame. They didn't have long to dwell on it. The second man's horse had bolted during the fight, thundering off into the distance. "Now Kane knows we're coming," Elias said flatly. They rode hard the rest of the day, chasing the trail until the light began to fade. The land funneled them into a narrow canyon, its stone walls casting long shadows across the path. Elias pulled his horse to a stop. "We'll camp here," he said. Anna glanced around. "Feels like a trap." "Good," he replied. "Then we'll see them before they see us." That night, she lay awake under a sky littered with stars, listening to the faint crackle of the fire and the restless wind whispering through the canyon. She thought of Daniel's grave, of Kane's mocking smile, of the moment she would finally stand face to face with the man who had taken everything from her. She didn't know if she would live through it, but she knew she was ready to try. The next morning, the canyon was still and cold, the stone walls holding the shadows like secrets. Elias moved first, silent as a hunting cat, scanning the ridges before mounting his horse. Anna followed, her breath visible in the crisp air. By midday, they reached the skeleton of an abandoned settlement shacks leaning at odd angles, their windows black hollows. Elias reined in his horse, eyes narrowing. "Kane's used this place before," he murmured. "If he's here, he'll have men on every side." Anna felt the air change, thick with that heavy quiet she'd learned to fear. Her hand drifted toward her revolver. The first shot came from the left, splintering wood inches from her face. She dropped from the saddle and rolled behind a trough. Elias was already moving, firing back with deadly precision. A voice rang out from somewhere in the shadows, mocking and drawled. "Come on out, Keller. We've been waiting." Anna's chest tightened. The man who stepped into view wasn't Kane, just another one of his wolves, grinning with a pistol in his hand. Elias's voice was low, calm. "Take him." Anna's hands felt numb around the revolver, but she forced herself to aim. Her breath slowed. She squeezed the trigger. The man jerked backward, surprise etched on his face before he crumpled. She barely had time to register what she'd done before more gunfire erupted. The world became a blur of movement, shadows darting between buildings, the sharp crack of rifles, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. Elias moved like water, shifting from cover to cover, his shots unerring. Anna kept low, firing when she could, her stomach churning with each pull of the trigger. She didn't look at the faces of the men who fell, only at their hands, their weapons. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the shooting stopped. The air rang with silence, broken only by the creak of old wood and the slow settling of dust. Elias stepped into the open, scanning the rooftops. "They were stalling us," he said grimly. "For what?" "For Kane to move. He knows exactly where we are now." Anna's eyes followed the empty street to the far edge of the settlement. Beyond it lay a stretch of open land that led toward a dark notch in the horizon. Even from here, she could feel it. That was where Kane would be. They didn't stop to rest. By the time the sun dipped low, they had reached the mouth of a canyon that seemed to swallow the light. Smoke curled faintly upward in the distance. Elias slowed his horse, dismounting without a word. Anna followed, checking her revolver. Her hands no longer trembled. Elias glanced at her. "If you get the shot, take it. Don't wait for me." She nodded. The path narrowed as they moved forward, the high walls pressing in. Then came the voice, smooth, mocking, and far too close. "You took your time, Keller." Victor Kane stepped from the shadows, his black coat swaying in the breeze, a bottle dangling from one hand. He looked almost amused. "You went and got yourself a Comanche killer," he said, nodding toward Elias. "Guess you finally realized you weren't cut out for this alone." Shapes emerged behind him, half a dozen men, guns already drawn. Kane's eyes found hers, and his smile turned cold. "This ends with you in the ground, same as your husband." Anna's breath came steady, even. "Not today." She lifted her revolver, and this time she didn't hesitate. Kane moved first, fast, almost too fast to see, but Anna's gun was already up. The crack of her shot split the air, slamming into his shoulder and spinning him back with a growl of pain. Then the canyon exploded with chaos. Gunfire echoed off the stone walls, each shot ricocheting in Anna's ears. Elias dropped low, his rifle barking in sharp, precise bursts. The first man to rush him collapsed mid-stride, blood blooming dark across his chest. Anna darted toward a boulder, bullets sparking off the stone around her. A shadow lunged from the side, one of Kane's men, his knife flashing in the dim light. She fired point blank, the force of the shot throwing him backward. Her heartbeat pounded in her skull, but her hands were steady now. She moved with purpose, scanning for Kane. But he was gone, slipping into the dark like smoke through fingers. "Gray," she called over the din. Elias's eyes swept the canyon in one quick motion before he nodded toward the far end. "He's running." They gave chase, boots pounding over the hard-packed earth. The walls narrowed, then opened into a wide clearing where moonlight spilled across the ground like silver water. Kane stood at the edge of the river, his coat hanging open, one hand clamped to his bleeding shoulder. His revolver dangled from the other, loose but ready. Anna slowed, raising her weapon. Kane laughed, a low, bitter sound. "Go on then. Do it. Put me down, and see if it changes a damn thing." Her jaw tightened. This isn't about changing things. He took a shaky step toward her, eyes gleaming with something between mockery and challenge. "Your husband died because he thought he could take something from me. You think killing me makes you any different?" For a moment, the words hung there, but she didn't flinch. Anna stepped closer until the barrel of her gun was level with his chest. "No," she said quietly. "It just makes you gone." The shot cracked through the night, echoing off the canyon walls. Kane staggered, surprise flickering across his face before he dropped to his knees, then collapsed into the dirt. Silence followed, broken only by the faint rush of the river. Anna stood over him, her breath ragged but her hands steady. Elias approached, his eyes flicking briefly to Kane's body before settling on her. She met his gaze, the reality of what she'd done sinking deep into her bones. "It's done," she said. He nodded once. "Then we move." They made their way back through the canyon, past the fallen men and the smoldering remnants of campfires. When they reached their horses, Elias swung into his saddle with the same quiet ease as always. Anna hesitated. "Where will you go now?" "Wherever the wind takes me." She studied him in the moonlight, the faint glint of that old scar on his jaw. Part of her wanted to ask him to stay, but she knew better. Men like Elias didn't belong anywhere for long. "You don't need me anymore," he said, almost as if reading her thoughts. And for the first time since Daniel's death, she realized he was right. She climbed into her own saddle, turning her horse toward the open horizon. The night air was cool against her face, and the stars stretched endlessly overhead. The world was still dangerous, still wild. But she was not the same woman who had begun this journey. And for the first time in a long time, she was free. The moon still hung low when Anna and Elias broke camp. There was no talk of breakfast, no lingering over the dying embers of the fire, only the sound of leather straps tightening and the muffled thud of boots on dry earth. Kane was wounded, yes, but not dead, and a man like him would never simply run. He would coil himself like a rattlesnake and strike when they least expected. The morning air was sharp, carrying the metallic tang of old rain on stone. The land rose and fell in harsh, unwelcoming shapes, jagged ridges, gullies swallowed by shadow, and lonely patches of scrub clawing at the ground. Elias rode with his eyes always in motion, scanning the terrain ahead, while his left hand rested near the hilt of the knife strapped across his chest. Anna matched his pace, but her mind was turning over what had happened the night before the chase, the shots, the split-second decisions. The image of Kane's face when she shot him in the shoulder replayed in her thoughts, but it wasn't enough. That moment hadn't ended it. It had only deepened the blood debt. They came across the trail just after noon. The ground told the story, hoof prints cutting deep into the soft patches of earth, the occasional dark splash of blood marking Kane's path. "He's hurt worse than I thought," Elias murmured, crouching beside the tracks. "But he's still moving." Anna knelt beside him, studying the print. "Where's he headed?" Elias didn't answer immediately. His gaze swept toward the north ridge where the rocks rose into a maze of narrow cuts and overhangs. "Somewhere he can dig in and make us come to him." They pressed on, the trail winding higher into the ridge. The silence between them was unbroken until the smell of wood smoke drifted on the wind. Elias slowed, raising his hand for her to do the same. From their vantage point, they could see a crude camp in a rocky hollow below, 3 men moving about, their rifles slung but close at hand. Kane wasn't in sight. "Not all his men were in the canyon," Elias said, voice low. "We take these 3 out, and it's just him." Anna's stomach tightened. "Quiet, quiet." They split apart, circling the hollow from opposite sides. Anna's boots found purchase on the uneven stone, each step deliberate, careful. Her heart hammered in her ears as she drew closer to the nearest man, who crouched over the fire stirring something in a dented pot. She raised her revolver, inhaled once, and fired. The shot hit clean, dropping him before he could turn. The other 2 reacted instantly, one diving for cover while the other swung his rifle toward her. From the rocks above, Elias's rifle cracked twice 2 clean, distant shots that sent both men sprawling lifeless in the dust. Anna descended into the hollow, her boots crunching on loose gravel. She kept her gun ready as she moved from body to body, making certain none would rise again. The smell of smoke and blood mixed in the air, thick and clinging. Elias joined her, already scanning the edges of the camp. "He'll know they're gone," he said. "If he didn't hear the shots, he'll feel the silence." Anna's gaze slid to the north wall of the hollow, where a narrow trail twisted upward. "Then he's just ahead." Elias met her eyes. "Then it ends tonight." The sun was a fading ember on the horizon by the time they reached the ridge's upper path. The air thinned, growing colder, and the shadows deepened into black pools between the rocks. Somewhere in that darkness, Kane was waiting, hurt, dangerous, and likely more desperate than ever. Anna adjusted her grip on her revolver, feeling the familiar weight settle into her hand. She had chased this man across miles of dust and stone, through blood and fire. Whatever happened next, She knew there was no turning back. Elias's voice was little more than a whisper. From here on, there's no talking. We move like ghosts. Anna nodded, the last sliver of daylight slipping away as they stepped into the shadows. The ridge swallowed them whole, the narrow trail forcing them to move single file between jagged stone walls. Above, the moon was just a pale cut in the darkness, offering enough light to turn the edges of the rock silver, but leaving the deeper corners untouched. Every step seemed to echo, even though their boots touched the ground softly. Elias moved like a predator, silent, purposeful, his head tilting occasionally to catch sounds Anna couldn't hear. Once, he raised a hand and froze, his other hand already resting on the knife hilt. She held her breath, straining to catch what had alerted him, but there was nothing, no wind, no movement. Then she saw it, a glint of metal in the shadows ahead, no bigger than a coin, but unmistakable, the reflection of moonlight on a rifle barrel. The shot came without warning. A flash, a crack. The bullet struck the stone inches from Anna's head, sending sharp fragments into her cheek. Elias shoved her hard toward the wall as he returned fire in the same breath, his rifle barking once, twice. Somewhere ahead, a man cried out and went silent. They pressed forward faster now, knowing the element of surprise was gone. The trail opened into a plateau, flat, but littered with boulders large enough to hide behind. And there, standing just beyond the flickering light of a small campfire, was Victor Kane. His coat was torn at the shoulder where she'd shot him days ago, the dark stain still visible. His face was pale under the brim of his hat, but his eyes were sharp, burning with a kind of cold hatred. "I knew you'd follow," he called out, voice carrying easily over the open space. "And I knew you'd bring help." His gaze slid to Elias. "Figured you for a ghost, Gray. Guess ghosts can bleed after all." Half a dozen shapes shifted in the dark behind Kane, men armed and ready. Elias didn't so much as flinch. "You're running out of men." Kane smirked. "I only need one bullet for each of you." Anna stepped forward, revolver steady in her grip. "You already had your chance. You killed my husband in front of me, and you laughed. You think I came all this way to let you walk away again?" Kane tilted his head, the firelight catching the sharp line of his jaw. "I think you came all this way to die in the same dirt he did." The moment stretched thin, one of those dangerous silences that shatter without warning. Then Kane's hand twitched toward his gun. Anna was already moving. She fired, her shot striking the rock just beside him. In the same instant, Elias's rifle roared, dropping one of Kane's men before he could raise his weapon. The plateau exploded into chaos. Gunfire lit the darkness in bursts of orange and white, shadows leaping wildly against the rock walls. Anna ducked behind a boulder, the acrid tang of gunpowder stinging her throat. She fired at a shape moving to flank her, catching him in the chest. Elias moved through the fight with deadly precision, each shot deliberate and final. But Kane had vanished into the darkness again, just like before. Anna's pulse hammered in her ears as she scanned the shadows, searching for that black coat, that smirk. She knew he wouldn't run far, not this time. This was the kind of man who'd rather end it face to face. Somewhere in the dark, gravel shifted under a boot. Anna turned toward the sound, her finger tightening on the trigger. The sound came again, subtle, almost lost beneath the fading gunfire, but Anna's instincts locked onto it. She stepped away from the cover of the boulder, her revolver raised, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the dying firelight. "Kane," she called, her voice cutting through the stillness. "Come out." A low chuckle answered her. It came from her left, then from ahead, as if the canyon itself were laughing. And then he was there, Victor Kane, emerging from behind a cluster of rocks, his revolver hanging loose in his hand, his face half hidden beneath the brim of his hat. "You should have stayed home, Keller," he said. "Should have let the dirt cover him and the memory fade. But now, here we are." Anna took a step forward, her boots crunching on the loose gravel. "You think I could forget?" He shrugged, though the motion was stiff pain from the wound she'd given him days ago. "It's the only way to survive in this world. You forget. You keep moving. You don't cling to the dead." Elias's shadow moved at the far edge of her vision, silent as ever, circling wide. Kane noticed, his revolver snapping up toward the sound. Anna didn't give him the chance to fire. She pulled the trigger. The shot struck him square in the chest. Kane staggered back, the breath leaving him in a sharp, shocked gasp. His revolver slipped from his hand, clattering against the stone. For a moment, his eyes locked on hers, still defiant, still burning with that same cold arrogance. Then the light in them dimmed, and he crumpled into the dust. The night fell silent, the echoes of the gunshot fading into the distant ridges. Anna stood over him, the revolver still in her hand, her pulse loud in her ears. It was done. Elias approached, glancing briefly at the body before looking at her. "You got what you came for." She holstered the revolver, the motion feeling heavier than it should have. "I did." But the truth was, it wasn't the relief she'd imagined. The weight she'd carried for so long hadn't vanished, it had only shifted. They left the plateau without another word, descending the trail until the ground leveled out beneath the open sky. Their horses waited where they'd left them, tethered in the shadow of a scrub tree. Elias mounted first, his silhouette framed against the pale wash of moonlight. "You'll be all right," he said simply. Anna met his gaze. "Where will you go?" He looked out toward the horizon, where the land stretched on forever. "Wherever the wind takes me." A part of her wanted to ask him to stay, but she knew it would be useless. Men like Elias Gray didn't belong anywhere. They moved with the wind, stayed only as long as the fight did, and left before the roots could grow. "You don't need me anymore," he added. Anna drew in a slow breath, realizing he was right. She mounted her horse, the saddle leather creaking beneath her. Ahead lay the same wild, dangerous frontier she'd always known, but now she wasn't the same woman who had ridden into it, desperate and broken. Elias gave her one last nod before turning his horse away, disappearing into the shadows of the ridge. Anna watched until he was gone. Then she turned her own mount toward the horizon. The stars hung bright above her, the wind cool against her face. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't chasing anything. She was riding toward whatever came next. By the way, we noticed something small. Most people who watch these stories aren't actually subscribed to the channel. Maybe we get caught up in the moment, or just forget to hit the button. But your support truly helps us keep creating stories like this. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel.